Welcome back to Your Career Oasis. I'm your host, Karin, and today I'm talking about something very personal, which is how I learned that I am a projector type in human design and how that has hurt my career in the past and what I do with that now. I think human design is a really beautiful system because it helps us understand ourselves better. It often puts a lot of past situations into context, and it also helps us live now in a more peaceful way and create a more peaceful life. I'm going to share a little bit about how my self-worth, my career, what I was able to do and accomplish, everything was tied into being a projector, even though I didn't know it. And it's really healing to realize this now, but it's also kind of painful to realize how much I was working against myself for all of those years of my career. If you have ever felt like you are working harder than everyone else, and yet you're still not getting ahead, you're still not getting the recognition you deserve, you're still not getting the peace you deserve, this one is going to be for you. So let's start, because one of the most important things about human design is that it brings in this element of conditioning. It really makes us understand the ways in which we have been conditioned throughout our lives. As a kid, the message that I absorbed from my parents was work hard or you're lazy. Okay, one of my parents is a generator and the other was a manifesting generator. And so they have a very different energy type than projectors, which is what I am. They were always moving around, and I learned I should always be moving as well. The other thing about my parents is that they used the adjective of competent or incompetent as their primary go-to adjective for a person. So I learned early on that to be incompetent or lazy was the worst thing that you could be. So my child brain, as kid brains do, instilled the message inside of me that in order to be worthy of love, of respect from my parents, of recognition from my parents, I had to be competent and I could not be lazy. That very much instilled itself and is something I still honestly am rewriting for myself because it's so deeply ingrained in me that my worthiness is tied up into my productivity. My self-worth is tied into the recognition I get when I do a good job. Now, they often say also that projector kids are often called lazy, and I can tell you for a fact I was not called lazy because I learned early on that laziness was not something to be. And I had to keep up with my parents, which meant I was not lazy because we were always on the go, always doing something, always had a project, etc. Flash forward in my life and how this ends up playing out in my career. The high level themes are overworking and being invisible, but in plain sight. Okay, so a few examples of this: being in a high level leadership position. At my last role, I was a director level, and I was in a position with a lot of visibility and a lot of responsibility for a lot of people. I was in this role where I was supposed to be imparting wisdom and supposed to be creating systems, supposed to be doing all these things. And I'm a projector in human design. The projector strategy is to wait for the invitation. But I was in a leadership role where it was also expected that I initiate. So there's some dissonance there between being expected to initiate and also living in my design, which is waiting for the invitation. So from the start, just my general type wasn't going to be a great fit in that role. I didn't know that at the time. But one of the things about projectors is that we are incredibly efficient. We have small batteries and we use them very efficiently. The shadow of that I personally experienced in multiple roles was because I was so efficient at getting things done, more was handed to me. I was efficient and I was good at what I did. And so I got more and more and more put on my plate because it was kind of like, oh, give it to Karin. Karin can handle it. Karin can handle it. And the problem with that is that meant that I was, it started with no longer taking my lunch break. Now I'm working through lunch. Then it starts with now I'm showing up early. Then it starts with now I'm showing up early, working through lunch, and staying late because I have more and more and more put on my plate. When in fact, what I needed was rest. What I needed was a break. And no one's seen that this is the load I had. In fact, there were folks who had the audacity to suggest that I didn't do anything. And it was like, are you kidding me right now? Like, I do more than pretty much anybody. I mean, I think a lot of people were pushed to their limits in that specific situation. However, I felt like my role was untenable, but I also knew how much I could produce. And I was like, man, if I can't get this done, then who really can? Is there actually somebody who could, this is a reasonable workload for anyone? The answer is no, absolutely not. It was not reasonable. The thing about this is how this ends up manifesting in me is one, I'm not getting everything done, or I'm not being able to complete things to the integrity that I would want to. So now my confidence is going down. It's like I should be able to do this, but I didn't. So I also pushed myself to the point where one day, this is at a job many years ago now, but one day I just simply couldn't lift my arm. Middle of the workday, my right arm stopped being usable, which is a sign of a rotator cuff injury, but I hadn't done anything to injure my rotator cuff. It just, my body at that point was just like, nope, you're done. I am right-handed, so I couldn't barely write. I couldn't type. I had a ton of issue. I couldn't wash dishes. I couldn't do it, basically anything with it. And that was like a physical reaction of that level of stress, of me trying to keep up with a generator level of energy and production. So for any manifestors or reflectors out there, this might really resonate for you because we're not meant to keep up with the generators of the world. They have an internal battery and we're not actually meant to keep up with them. But when we force ourselves to do it, we're going to burn out. That was physical burnout, my arm not lifting, right? I also, in my most recent role, I experienced a lot of emotional burnout. This pressure to produce, this pressure to work more and more and more pushed me to the point I started having actual anxiety attacks. There's a lot more to that story and a lot more going on that wasn't simply the amount of work. It was the environment and things going on in it. But I did emotionally burn out to the point of having anxiety attacks and calling the EAP, Employee Assistance Program, and starting to go to therapy because of my job. Side note, if you are needing to go to therapy because of your job, it is 100% time to find a new job. Bringing it back. So this had a huge emotional impact. I lost a lot of confidence because I couldn't get everything done. I also lost confidence because I was being told, given feedback I didn't understand. A little bit more on that in a minute. I felt so unseen and I not being recognized that I also felt like my efforts were going absolutely nowhere. And it was really disappointing to me because the thing about being a projector is that we have some very beautiful hidden gifts that role were just simply not appreciated. A lot of our brilliance tends to be misunderstood. My natural ability is as a facilitator, a coach, and a guide. And here I am, by the way, a career coach. That is what I do. And so I found my way to my natural abilities, right? But the fact is that I see very deeply into people and I do it really quickly. Projectors have what they call a penetrating aura. So we see straight into people. The problem with seeing people is that some people don't want to be seen. And when you see into people and you see some of their shadows and they know you see them, they're going to act out. They're going to react. And they can react very negatively. Flight, fight, or freeze, right? In that situation, I had people acting out against me. So an example is like I was receiving feedback from one of the staff that I managed, and they shared we had been having communication challenges and just interpersonal challenges for several months at this point. And we were in the performance review, and I was asking, what is going on? And they shared something that had happened like 3 months prior. And I said, okay, so for me, from my brain, I was like, wait, so this is all about this one little thing that I didn't even ask you, to do? And they were like, yeah, that's it. And I was like, but it's not just about that. What's underneath that? So what did that situation, which was real and valid, what did that trigger underneath? Like, what is the root that situation triggered? And they said, no, it's not. There's nothing else. There's nothing else. It's just that. And then I was accused of gaslighting for having asked that question and for having tried to dig deeper. I was accused of gaslighting because I didn't accept the one situation at face value. And it turned out, yes, there was a lot more underneath the surface. And that one situation triggered other things that they were feeling. And then narrative developed, right? Because if something happens and we don't share feedback, we don't talk about it, we develop a story in our heads. That is what happened in this situation. And so I ended up finding myself being surrounded by people who didn't know what I was good at, didn't appreciate some of my unique gifts. And that really led me to undermine my own trust in myself. And I undermined my trust that I could do the job. It created a lot of imposter syndrome and then fueled the imposter syndrome that it created. And it was really a struggle because I knew I'd always been such a good employee and such a rock star. And knowing what you are good at and then seeing people not think you're good at it is kind of a mind fuck. It's very difficult to balance that out within yourself. When I discovered and learned about human design and I learned that I'm a projector, it was both a feeling of a lot of validation as well as some resistance. I felt validated to know that one, yeah, I am super efficient. I always felt like I was really efficient and I have efficient ways of doing things and I see systems and patterns. And so having that reflected back to me, I'm like, oh, I really am good at those things. Okay, that's real. Very validating, right? I also felt resistance. I also felt like, wait, what is this rest thing? My entire life, I have spent being able to accomplish and achieve so much and being always on the go. And I was very proud of that hard work ethic that was conditioned into me, that I was like, that doesn't really seem to align. I don't really need rest, right? Like I had a lot of resistance to this idea of rest. And that resistance was really based in this place of conditioning that in order to achieve, you have to work really hard. In order to have ambition, you have to be always at it. And so I was thinking that if I rest, then I'm not ambitious. If I rest, then I'm not achieving. I won't make my goals. That was completely false. And I see that now, but that was my initial resistance to learning about being a projector. And I hear that from a lot of people, is this idea that we're not made to work hard. Or they know this, we are seers. Like that was very validating for me to hear. I'm like, yeah, I'm a coach. Like that's what I do. So of course I'm like, this makes so much sense. And understanding that people get really triggered sometimes when I see into them and they don't want to be seen. And I was like, okay, well, that's also makes sense why some situations haven't gone well. Looking back, I relate this back to having my ability to be productive exploited. And, just thinking like, if I can't do the workload with integrity, no one can. And that is a sign of misalignment because I actually can do the workload, like a 40-hour week workload. Most projectors can probably do their 40 hours of work in a matter of 20 to, we'll say 30. We'll be really generous here. And so if you're working 60 hours as a projector, not only are you definitely not getting rest, you're probably doing 2 full jobs. We have to start looking at this, like how do we live in alignment with the projector strategy, which is to wait for the invitation, right? And so part of that is honoring our need for rest and then using bitterness as our red flag. Okay, so if I feel bitterness coming in, what I do now is I pause, because that is the emotional red flag of a projector. I can pause. I can trace back my steps to where I initiated instead of being invited. Big examples, small examples, it doesn't matter. I recently, somebody was having a baby and I was offering them like a hand-me-down or something. And I said, oh, by the way, and I shared this tip that I knew because I had just had a baby. And their response was not delighted with my wisdom that I just imparted, but they also didn't ask, right? They're like, I didn't ask you. They didn't say that. But that's like the impression I got. It was kind of like, cool, bro, thanks. Like, I didn't ask you for that advice, but here I am putting it out, even though I wasn't invited to give it. And then I felt bitter. And it was so simple. It was such a small thing, right? But I still felt bitter about something so small. So if you are a projector and you are feeling bitter a lot in life, that is a flag for you. You need to look back and say, okay, where am I forcing it? Where am I initiating? Where am I putting things out there when I have not been invited to do so? If you start waiting for the invitation instead, you will experience so much less resistance. It's a really brilliant thing that projectors have. Like, we have so much brilliance and so many gifts, and yet we tend to feel we don't see them, or other people don't experience them because we feel unrecognized. And our not self theme of bitterness is when that comes up when we're not being recognized. And that's why waiting for the invitation is so important, is because people have to recognize our brilliance. And once they do, and then they invite us, and by invite, I mean they ask us a question, or they just acknowledge our brilliance. That's an invitation. Suddenly we're able to share it, and it feels so good because we're sharing it with folks who want to hear it. The gifts of a projector are really, really beautiful. Our ability to see patterns and create systems. I am using that now in my freelance coaching, and I'm super excited by it because I find it really fun. I'm getting the opportunity to like process map a whole thing, and I'm like, oh, this is fun. I geek out on stuff like that because I'm good at it, and I think it's fun to put the puzzle together. We also get to help people feel really seen. I talked a little bit about seeing people when they don't want to be seen, but my gosh, when I see people who want to be seen, it is such a beautiful thing. I do this all the time in my coaching. I'm really good at seeing people, and that makes people feel good. And then that makes me feel good. It's mutually beneficial because most of us want to be seen in some ways. We just have to know that we need to focus that effort of being able to really see people on the people who invite us to see them. Because when we really see people who do not invite us, catastrophe, resistance, bad shit's going to happen. It's not going to go well. That deep alignment that I feel now comes from following the strategy of waiting for the invitation. This idea of not being built for work, no, it's not about not being built for work. We are built for efficiency. We are built for insight, and we are built for leadership on our own terms. Projectors, we are very much on our own terms people. This is why I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an on my own terms person. It doesn't mean I can't work on a team. I work on a team right now. I do freelance coaching, and it's amazing. We have such synergy. But it's also because I was invited, and the people I work with see that in me and are open to it, right? I was invited. So I am responding to an invitation where I get to show these elements, but in my own way. When we think back then to what this means for ambition and achievement, it's not about not being built for work. It's that ambition doesn't mean self-destruction. Ambition and rest, achievement and rest, they coexist. They can coexist. And this is not what I was conditioned to believe. And this is not generally what the US society, the way we live, capitalism, patriarchy, all of these things, this is not how it conditions us. It conditions us to believe that the only way to get ahead, the only way to achieve is to work really, really, really hard. That is a limiting belief I am still working on healing from and recovering from. And that is actually a generational trauma response. Different topic for a different episode. But rest and ambition can coexist. And that is the thing that is so important that I have had to do a lot of unlearning around. Okay. And redefining, what does hard work even mean? Hard work is alignment. Hard work is ancestral healing. There's hard physical work. There's also hard emotional work and hard mental work. But when you are doing what you're built for and following your design, it doesn't feel like hard work. So I do freelance coaching, and I told my collaborator, I was like, I don't even remember sometimes that I get paid for this because it's so fun and easy. It is so aligned for me. It's so meaningful and so powerful for me. And so what I want my fellow projectors out there to know is that if you are struggling right now, I have some actionable advice. First of all, trust your timing and honor your rhythm. You do not have to achieve more in order to be worthy. You do not have to prove your worth. Your productivity is already very impressive, just you naturally. You don't have to be even more productive to be even more impressive. You're already impressive. So honor your rhythm. Make sure you're building in rest. Specifically, build in rest by under-promising and over-delivering on your timelines. Because remember, you're super productive. What takes you 1 hour will take somebody else 3 hours. So when somebody says, okay, about how long do you think that'll take? And you think 1 hour, tell them 3. Even if it takes you an hour and a half or 2 hours, you still overpromised and you built in time to rest. I think that the under promise over deliver for a projector is like really, really easy thing to do. If you are job searching, your goal is visibility. You are not here to chase jobs. You are here to be as visible as possible to ensure that you are invited to the opportunities. So when I say be visible, I have an entire episode where I talk about some of this. I'll link it here. And then finally, I want you to use bitterness as a compass. Remember that if you're feeling bitter, it's time to pause, take a step back, and look back at, okay, where did I initiate instead of be invited? Where am I forcing it? And then finally, learn about your undefined centers in human design, because a lot of our conditioning comes from our centers that are undefined. If you're not sure what that means, drop me a DM. I'm happy to talk you through it. But basically, our undefined centers don't have the consistent energy that our defined centers do, and that makes them more vulnerable to conditioning. So we can dig into those spaces to understand ourselves even better. And the more that we understand ourselves, the more we feel connected and aligned with our true self, the more peaceful life is. And I can tell you right now that my life is so much more peaceful after finding out that I was a projector, because I don't force it anymore. I also follow my authority, which is I'm a splenic authority. I'm not talking about authority deep dive here today, but I'm a splenic authority. So I follow my strategy and then I follow my authority. That's how I make decisions. I do those two things, and so much of the stress has just floated away from life. It doesn't mean I don't experience stress. It doesn't mean that stressful things do not happen. However, a lot of the stress that I was experiencing, I've caused myself throughout my entire career. And if I had lived into this strategy earlier, I would have had so much less stress because I would have experienced so much less resistance. I would have not burnt myself out. It's not the job that burnt me out. It was me. I burnt myself out. Once you learn these things about yourself, you're able to move through the world and move through life in a way that is just feels so good and so natural. And so being a projector has challenged everything I thought that I needed and had to be in order to succeed. And it challenges that every single day. But it's also given me permission to do things differently, to do things my own way. And that permission is freedom. So I feel a lot of peace. I feel a lot of freedom. And so if you are a fellow projector, connect. If you're just a human trying to heal from burnout, I would love to hear from you. Please drop a DM on social media, drop a comment under the video or the podcast, and share this episode with somebody who needs it, because it's so important that we hear these messages that are counter-cultural to the capitalist society that we live in that just promotes productivity. No, we are human beings. We are unique, and we can live peaceful, free lives.